brings us to our next item of business, which is our public hearings. Item PH1 is an ordinance amending the official zoning maps of the city to rezone property containing 1.03 acres located at 6789 Wrightsville Avenue from R10 Residential District to ONI 1 CD Office and Institutional District 1 Conditional District for a mixed-use building. This was continued from our June 19, 2018 meeting. And I will also note for the record that whoever makes the motion must read a consistency statement for the record. At this time, I'd like to recognize our city manager, Mr. Cheatham. Mr. Cheatham.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Ms. Megan Crow, Associate Planner, will present this item.
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. In your package uploaded to the internet, we were missing attachment number 11. Staff has provided paper copies for the board, which I'll give to the clerk to pass out. This information is available to the public. The internet had been corrected later this afternoon. The document for attachment number 11 is a letter to council from a citizen regarding this request. At the June 5th meeting, City Council voted to continue this item at the request of the applicant. At June 19th, the continuance was requested from staff to analyze the driveway access to the site on Wrightsville Avenue. What we're looking at here is a property that is consistent of 1.03 acres with adjacent rights-of-way of Jones Road and Wrightsville Avenue. On the screen, you can see the nearby developments and landmarks within the site being in the middle of the map. Macomber Terrace is the single-family residential neighborhood which is bordering the site. To the west and northwest of the property is zoned R10 Residential District and occupied by single-family residences. To the north and northeast is zoned R15 Residential District that is currently occupied by a religious institution. South of the subject property is zoned UMX. On this slide here, you can see the site and the roadways that intersect with the property. Jones Road is an existing unimproved city-maintained roadway with approximately 30 feet of right-of-way. The applicant will be required to upgrade this road along the entire frontage of the property to city standards. The applicant is proposing a 3-story mixed-use building with retail, offices, and residential units. It is proposed to have 3 residential units, each with 1 bedroom. The applicant will employ the commercial district mixed-use provision of the Land Development Code, which allows for residential uses to be included in commercial development if the prescribed design standards are met. On the site plan, there are driveway locations in both Wrightsville and Jones Road. Staff did request a continuance of this item to provide an opportunity to analyze the driveway on Wrightsville Avenue. Since then, Davenport Engineering was commissioned by the applicant to prepare a traffic analysis as to the potential impact of the driveway on future improvements of Wrightsville Avenue. The analysis indicates that the proposed driveway would not have negative impact on Wrightsville Avenue and Jones Road. The analysis considered both a traffic signal and roundabout at this intersection. While staff does have reservations regarding the driveway access on Wrightsville Avenue, we do not believe that these concerns warrant denial of the driveway at this time. If at some point in the future a redesign of Wrightsville Avenue shall become necessary for the proposed the functioning of the regional traffic network, this driveway may need to be modified or removed. A buffer is required between the proposed development and the adjacent single-family residential uses. You can see on the screen, buffer is written in green, and it would be where the trees are located on the site plan. The applicant is requesting that this buffer be reduced from the required 20 feet to 10 feet, and that would contain an 8-foot tall fence as permissible in section 18499. This area will serve as a screen between the existing single-family residential lots and the mixed-use project. Staff is recommending that this buffer not be reduced in order to maintain sufficient space between the existing single-family residences and the more intensive use, shielding the existing single-family from the third-floor residential units, retaining the existing vegetation, and avoiding the potential drainage issues between properties. The Planning Commission discussed conditioning this buffer to the full 20 feet in width. They also discussed lowering the height of the structure and voted to include an additional condition, number 12, to lower the height of the building to 35 feet to be consistent with the adjacent single-family uses. The applicant has agreed to this condition. Photos on the screen are from a site visit on the other side of Macomber Terrace from a new office building. The project known as Airlie Offices is on the corner of Military Cutoff Road and Wrightsville Avenue. This project included a reduced buffer of 10 feet with a fence, leaving essentially an unused area with planted vegetation and a ditch between fences. Although code would allow for a reduced buffer, this is not the best use of the space between lots. A 20-foot buffer would be more appropriate to buffer the single-family uses, as the parking area abuts the residences on the site plan. The proposed structure can be seen on the screen. This may need to be amended to meet the proposed condition number 12, that the building height shall not be over 35 feet, as added by the Planning Commission. The Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan includes a recommendation for highly active pedestrian-focused streetscape in areas that are designed as urban mixed-use centers, as well as encouraging active ground floor uses. As outlined in the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan, zoning should strive to use moderate density areas between high and low density areas. This is not limited just to land use, but all shall be considered in transitions to the urban form. The Wrightsville Sound Small Area Plan, adopted in 2011, identifies this property as recommended to retain single-family zoning or use up to R7. However, as the property fronts both Wrightsville Avenue and Jones Road, staff recognizes that it is unlikely to develop as a single-family residential due to the traffic, light, noise, and planned development along Wrightsville Avenue. The Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan identifies this area as an urban mixed-use center with an opportunity for high-density transition. The vertically mixed-use structure has a moderate density, providing an appropriate transition from the existing single-family to the west to the future high-density urban mixed-use center to the south and east of the property. The parking in the rear of the building ensures a walkable and active streetscape along Wrightsville Avenue, especially in a high-capacity transit route, and a connection to the Wave bus route on the property. The project is designed to have active ground floor and moderate lot coverage while balancing environmental sensitivity as identified in the Watershed Resource Protection designation. Staff believes that this amendment is consistent with the Create Wilmington Plan, the Wrightsville Sound Small Area Plan, and the city's adopted focus areas. On May 2nd, the Planning Commission recommended approval with a 6-1 vote, finding that the plan is reasonable and in the public interest, and recommended that approval with the conditions as listed in the case summary. This did include a full 20-foot buffer as number 7 and reduced building height as number 35. Staff and the applicant are available to answer any questions this board may have.
Any questions of staff? Yes, we have a question from Councilmember Barnett. Mr. Barnett.
Thank you. My question is about the what was it?
Clifford, could you please turn on your microphone? There we go.
Okay, thanks. Okay, my question was in reference to what you said about the Wrightsville Avenue, and you said that the staff was really not in favor of what they wanted to do, but you said it at the present time, it doesn't cause a problem.
That is correct. There is additional transportation staff, which is here, and would like to give input regarding this driveway in Wrightsville Avenue if it's the decision of the council.
Okay, so does it mean, so my question, I guess I'm just asking, does it mean then we would wait until another person tries to do something on Wrightsville Avenue to make that change, or?
If roadway improvements warranted a changing of the driveway, that could be a potential consequence in the future. Transportation staff may want to answer that question better than I, but they have provided that analysis and are happy to speak with this board if necessary.
Okay. Councilmember O'Grady.
I'm over here. Three things. I want to make sure I understood. The 35-foot height limit that's agreed to by the applicant?
That is correct.
How about the 20-foot buffer? I wasn't clear. Do they agree to that or not?
It's my understanding they did agree to that. They may want to provide additional information this evening.
And the transportation people will ask questions about the proximity of this driveway to what may someday get built here.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll ask that question to them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Lawler?
Yes, Megan, the illustration here shows parking, two rows of parking. Is that with the 20-foot buffer, or is that a 10-foot buffer?
The site on the screen has a 10-foot buffer here.
So would that 20-foot buffer would reduce this parking, or would it affect the parking?
It's my understanding that it would. The applicant would potentially lose some of the parking spaces, but they do have more than the required parking at this time.
Okay. And then the 35-foot height limit says per the code. Do we measure to the top of the building, the highest point to the roof, to the top of the top floor? What do we
Sure.
what do we measure for 35 feet?
Height of the building is the vertical distance measured from the average undisturbed grade at the foundation to the highest roof surface, in the case of a flat roof or in the case of a pitched roof, to a point halfway between the highest peak and the highest eave.
Okay. And then I have a question about the access, but I guess that would be best for the transportation folks.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Anderson?
If the 20-foot buffer is what ends up happening here as advocated by your department or yourself, would there be a fence? Is a fence required then or not? I guess because what I'm getting at is they're proposing a fence and the 10-foot, correct?
That's correct.
Is it required with the 20?
The 20-foot buffer would be an opaque screen, 100% opacity, so it would not have to require that fence.
Screening meaning vegetation.
That's correct.
I mean, a concern there that I would have is, I mean, the trade-off would be, if somebody's headlights are not in your backyard. So, yeah, thank you. You answered my question.
The 20-foot buffer that's there, the 20 foot from the rear of the property lines that exist, I believe it's the Sheffields, and I haven't got good enough glasses to read that. But those property owners, from their property line to where the end of that 20 foot would be, it's fairly thick. I mean, there's large mature trees, so that would serve as a natural buffer.
The existing vegetation would need to stay within that 20-foot buffer.
Right. Because the dead man's zone that we've created up the street, I can't imagine why I raised my hand that night, but I did. But I'm glad we're using some common sense on this one. That's the best that the neighbors can hope for. And I'll address some transportation questions when those folks come up. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. This time I'd like to recognize the applicant.
Thank you very much. My name is Cindy Wolf, and I'm representing the owner and developer of the property. I believe that everyone is familiar with the location, as Megan pointed out, at the corner of Wrightsville Avenue and Jones Road, but I think it's important to have just a little history of how we got where we are today. And it's been sort of a dynamic project based upon some issues about the driveway, the buffers and things like that. And I apologize, but the staff's materials aren't the most up to date. So I'd like to lead you through everything. Just first, some basic history on this. Back in 1985, Macomber Terrace was recorded, earmarking this land as Tract A. The Declaration of Covenants recorded the provision that the intention was that Tract A be used for commercial purposes. So this isn't sort of reaching as far as just taking a residential lot and trying to change it into a commercial site. Anyone that bought in that community or that is aware of the registered documents, this has been earmarked for commercial since day one. As Megan did point out also, the Create Wilmington plan further identified the triangle within its area of opportunity for high-density transition. So, the plan that we have before you tonight is this one. It is a small commercial district mixed-use development, such as what is proposed as excellent options for infill. They can accommodate low-intensity office, retail, and personal service uses at the edge or periphery of residential areas. They provide convenient locations for businesses that serve day-to-day needs of the surrounding residents. And they also support the strategy of creating residential infill opportunities vertically rather than taking up more land horizontally. This plan provides the full 20-foot buffer. It has all of the buffer yard that was recommended. It has the parking spaces that are necessary, and it still has the 3-story mixed-use building that is oriented up towards the front. The parking is screened behind as best possible, obviously, with a triangular site, and sidewalks will be constructed along both frontages and be provided to facilitate easy access for pedestrians into the project. We've done preliminary designs on the stormwater management, and we've been working with the church across the street. Part of this proposal will include the paving of Jones Road for the full frontage of our site, along with curb and gutter and sidewalk on one side. The other side we've talked to the church about in hopes of assisting them with some stormwater management problems they've had because Jones Road is an unimproved city street. So I'll come back to it obviously in my summary, but this is the plan that we're working with. It does have the full 20-foot buffer. The style is a coastal theme, and the architectural features provide a lot of interest on all facades. As to the elevation height of buildings in the city of Wilmington that have pitched roofs are measured to the mean of the highest roof pitch. So that would be the elevation that we're talking about here. We have had conversations with the neighbors, and the design of this to make it 3 stories, to make it successful as bottom floor commercial space, middle office space, and then the residential above. We have never been in agreement that that 35-foot limitation is doable. And so we have worked with the residents next door. I hope that we'll hear something as far as agreement of that, but the agreement has been made that the maximum peak of the roof would not exceed 48 feet. In calculating that down to this mean of the roof pitch, it would be equal to or less than 45 feet. 45 feet is the normal office and institutional district building height limitation. And we would ask that you approve this project without a limitation by what is generally by right. So it could normally be 45. When the Planning Commission dictated the 35, it was sort of, I guess they were using the limitation that is in a residential district. But we're requesting this rezoning and would hope that the rezoning would incorporate what is by right in the office and institutional district. We're thrilled to present this project because everyone has worked on it very hard over the period of time, but we'd like to provide some explanation, and a lot of that has to do with this driveway situation. As is usually the case with a project that requires rezoning approval, we sat down with the Technical Review Committee to have a preliminary discussion about the proposal. I find these meetings, although acknowledging that they are a broad view of a plan without details, an extremely valuable tool for negotiating through the process. The foremost subject to me was the question of access. It is immensely important for a mixed-use project to have adequate circulation, and this site is far too small for providing it internally. So the triangular shape of the site obviously created site constraints for the layout. With the intention of locating the building to address the intersection and both frontages, the rear parking drive worked out very well to maximize the separation of the curb cuts along both Wrightsville Avenue and Jones Road from the corner. And after no issues were voiced at TRC, our engineer made contact with the Department of Transportation for their preliminary verification of the adequacy of this driveway location. DOT's comments were that it would be restricted to a right-in, right-out movement, but they had no qualms about it accessing the site. In April, we were contacted by some interested parties about future improvement of Wrightsville Avenue to a complete street and concerns over our driveway location. We contacted both the city MPO and NCDOT for more information. Although it's my understanding that there is not currently a funded project, we wholeheartedly support it. But we got our traffic engineer involved to review the plan and determine that the driveway's distance from the intersection would present no adverse effect on future improvements to Wrightsville Avenue. The plan presented to the Planning Commission and all along for their positive recommendation has included the dual driveways. So after the meeting, the discussion intensified over these driveways, and we've been working diligently with staff and traffic professionals since then to satisfy concerns. We all know that redevelopment of the former Galleria commercial site is imminent. It is a large site that will have extensive urban mixed use. It is our understanding they have recently submitted a scoping request for a traffic impact analysis. The trips in and out of our project are obviously minimal as compared to what that development will generate, and the primary access to the project would appear to be from that intersection of Jones Road and Wrightsville Avenue. So we have gone about working again with the professionals and the staff, and two scenarios have been discussed, a roundabout and a traffic signal. These are exhibits of how each of them would operate, and our traffic engineer has run preliminary models based on fairly conservative estimates on volume and distribution dictated by the Department of Transportation. I believe these results have been provided to you by Mr. Moten. The cross-section of the proposed complete street of Wrightsville Avenue will not be affected by our driveway, no matter whether it consists of a 2-lane divided road, a 4-lane divided road, a 1-lane roundabout, a 2-lane roundabout, or a signalized intersection, in his professional opinion. The trolley station right-in, right-out access is limited. It is downstream to the west and to the west of the intersection of Wrightsville Avenue and Jones Road, which is considered the departure side of the intersection, not the approach side. It's the approach side that is the much more important to the functionality of an intersection because it controls lane storage, deceleration, reaction time. The Department of Transportation, and from what I understand, usually promotes at least a 50-foot to 100-foot driveway clearance to any intersection. And you can see on this that our driveway is in excess of 100 feet in both scenarios. The analysis results indicate that the access will not cue traffic back towards the intersection, either with the signal or roundabout, and the trolley station project will not have a negative effect upon the intersection or the any crosswalks that would be hopefully put in the future, which would be a big boon to pedestrian safety in there. Our traffic engineer is here to answer questions and provide additional explanation if needed, and of course the staff, your staff support is here. With that, I would just like to complete my presentation. We respectfully ask for your approval of this conditional zoning district petition with the normal 45-foot height limitation based on an office and institutional zoning criteria because it is consistent, reasonable, and in the public interest. The comprehensive supports the area for high-density transition, and the project improves the form and function of an underutilized site. It maximizes land use efficiency, and it will be an asset to the community. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Anderson has a question.
Cindy, on your rendering here, it shows a fence. Is that fence is existing? That's something?
Yes, there is a fence around the entire Macomber Terrace community. So that is not our fence, that's their fence. But we have a 20-foot buffer between that fence and the first parking.
Mr. Burnett?
You made a statement when you first came up that the staff didn't have the up-to-date material.
Just this plan. The staff's plan still showed the 10-foot fenced buffer That was the only thing that was really any different.
Is there any reason why they didn't have it?
It has been a dynamic project. We were working with different scenarios of height of building and different types of fences and buffers, but this is what we're proposing. This is more in agreement with the neighborhood, certainly what the staff requested and what the planning commission recommended.
And you have talked with the churches right in that area?
Yes, most of the conversation with the church has been over Jones Avenue, some drainage issues that they have, which paving of Jones Road will, I believe, improve.
Thank you.
Mr. Grady?
Hi.
Hello.
Ms. Wolf, is there a bus stop along this stretch of Wrightsville Avenue?
There is a bus stop out front, and part of working with WAVE during the detailed design and permitting of these types of projects, they have generally been asking for a bench now, which could be put there, along these sidewalks. So yes, there is a bus stop there, and it would continue to be there.
Okay. I'd like to hear more on the justification for 48 feet as a height, because I know that might be the by right height if this were already zoned. You'd have the right to build that, but this is not by right. I mean, it's a conditional district, and we've got to make it work with the neighborhood. I'm a little concerned that 48 is pretty high for a building at that spot.
The building height requirement would be the 45. I'm just saying because it was more discussed among the
Quibble
people.
over 3 feet,
Okay.
okay? It's in the 40s.
Yes.
And apparently the planning commission thought 35. Did anybody go over those, how that would affect the building, or what was their
Yes,
comments on
absolutely.
that?
Our architect, part of the whole purpose of the vertical mixed use is to is the 3 stories. And 3 stories, unless you put flat roofs on, unless you limited ceiling space, which deteriorates the marketability of commercial space, doesn't fit in 35 feet.
Mr. Rodenberg?
Cindy, in the TIA that was prepared by Davenport, was there consideration given with regard to how that affects pedestrian? I mean, I know TIA studies generally talk about motor vehicles and level of service, that kind of thing. But how about in the event that we do convert that Wrightsville Avenue to a complete street? Did this TIA have any bearing on pedestrian, bike, safety for the people that curb cut would have a direct effect on?
Keep in mind that it was not an entire traffic impact analysis for this project. This project didn't come close to tripping that threshold of having to do a complete one. What they did do, though, is sort of piggybacked off of another traffic impact analysis that's being done for a larger project, and then ran some, models in this roundabout, but I've sort of cut and pasted so my exhibits would show things a little bit better. But the same crosswalk could occur that is I'm being shown here, which has the appropriate distance from the roundabout and everything, would be roughly in the same place if this was a signalized intersection. There is already a bike lane on Wrightsville Avenue, and you can see on this exhibit that was prepared by somebody else's professionals, there would continue to be a bike lane along Wrightsville Avenue. So we're providing sidewalks, there is a bike lane, there would be, if this intersection were signalized, a crosswalk incorporated in part of the complete street. So yes, they have all been taken into consideration. That our driveway is not affecting that crosswalk on any of the 4 corners.
What study did you piggyback off of?
The scoping that's being done, I believe, for the Galleria project.
Okay. And in that project, it clearly denies any feasibility for that curb cut. I mean, on the complete street. I don't know where you managed to get that out of that study, but I can assure you that study does not advocate for a curb cut there.
it has nothing to do with our curb cut.
Well,
That study-
you're using their, I mean, you just admitted you're using their study to cut and paste your own study.
No. I believe, and I'll let my traffic engineer address this, we were using their study for the amount of trip generation to define the models of, if in a roundabout, how many cars are coming west from the roundabout, and would our driveway adversely affect stacking or reaction time or anything like that. In the traffic signalization scenario, absolutely it would not be affected, because if this driveway were not there, more of our traffic would have to come out to the Jones intersection and affect the turning at its signalization.
Okay. I'll reserve my next comments for the transportation people.
Any other questions of Cindy? Are you going to have your transportation?
Yes, he'll be up. Sorry. Oh, you want the city one?
Well, I think we need to hear from the applicant, and then we can bring the city staff people here.
Good evening, Dan Cumbo with Davenport. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Rumbo, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I'll ask that same question I asked Cindy. How do you, tell me how you are, I mean, you're talking about a sidewalk along your frontage and perhaps maybe even a bike lane on your frontage, but how does that tie in with a complete street development that is coming? I trust that this council and this city is committed to that. How does yours dovetail with that?
Well, I think Cindy did a good job explaining that with the scenarios with the complete street, there would be pedestrian crossings at whether it be a signalized intersection or a roundabout, and neither of those pedestrian crossings would interfere with the driveway that's proposed on Wrightsville Avenue. And then again, the bike lanes are already existing. That's something that can be maintained as far as the complete street. And as far as the study of the Galleria, they haven't actually performed their traffic study yet. It's not been completed, submitted, turned in. There's not a study document yet. They've only been through the scoping process, so they've submitted their trip generation, their proposed land uses, traffic volumes, where they would distribute traffic, where it's anticipated to distribute traffic. So some generalized scoping parameters for the traffic study for the Galleria. That's the information that we used to create traffic models that, also included their traffic as well as this trolley station development, this traffic, and put it all together along with their driveway. And the real focus was to focus in on the right-in, right-out driveway on Wrightsville Avenue and how it functioned with the intersection at Jones Road, whether it be a signal or a roundabout, and did it negatively or adversely impact that intersection, whether it be a roundabout or a signal, considering all the traffic from both developments. And we prepared those, we submitted those to city staff, we submitted all of that information, and our results did come back and did not show any queuing of traffic back from the right-in, right-out driveway back to the roundabout or back to the signal, whether it be, a 2-lane road or 4-lane road, complete street. It didn't show in our traffic analysis to have a negative impact. So I'm not sure, you had mentioned the Galleria study said that it was negative, but they haven't done a study yet. So.
Well, they've done enough for you to borrow from it. They've done probably about as much as you have, because Cindy herself said that what you did didn't reach the threshold of a TIA. But that's neither here nor there. If this were an interior property, I wouldn't even be having these comments, but this is a corner property. His customers have access out to Allen's Lane and therefore out to Military Cutoff. they have access to what you're proposing to be a signalized intersection or a roundabout. I don't get the heartburn that this developer is going to have with his patrons getting in and out and off that lot. It's a corner lot. So you don't need to comment on that. That's just my comment. Thank you.
Mr. Grady?
Thank you for coming. If you can look at the traffic circle version, which I hope someday we wind up with a traffic circle, because I'm a fan of those. So if I was coming east on Wrightsville and wanted to go to this development, essentially I would use the circle, go around the circle, go down, and then enter, making a right in, correct?
You could get off on Jones Road and make a left in the
Or you
driveway,
you could go around.
You could go around, basically making a U-turn.
So essentially the roundabout works with those entrances.
Correct.
Doesn't, I mean, just not being an engineer, but just sensing if I were driving, it would be easy to go around and up Jones Road to get in, or if you went all the way around, you make the right in. So I'm not seeing a problem with that particular location.
Well, just to go off of what you were saying, Cindy was speaking about it. This is on what we would call the downstream side of an intersection. So
Right.
it's not on the approach side, which causes more heartburn with having driveways. So I'd say, as far as a driveway in an intersection, just the location of this being on the downstream side is what makes it, a little better, more easier to swallow in this location.
What I'm saying is I'm okay with that one. I'm a little more concerned about the bus stop, because if we get a traffic circle and we have a bus stop there, isn't a place for the bus to pull off. This design that's shown here, and this may not be the design because we don't have one yet. We don't have any money to build it. We don't have any design, but it indicates a single lane. So if a bus came around and had to stop to pick up people who are sitting on a bench there, they're going to block the road. So what would the impact be of having a bus stop somewhere in that a pull-off in that 108-foot area?
I think that maybe some of your traffic staff can better respond to that, but I think that could be provided without impact.
Because frankly, with the traffic circle, that sidewalk crossing, I assume that was put in by your design for tonight? That little concrete crossing?
Crossing across Wrightsville Avenue?
Crossing, yeah.
Yes.
And that makes sense to connect a building that way. But I'm concerned about how we're going to fit a bus stop in there.
Well, I basically, it sounds like what you're saying is provide some pavement. It could be used for right turn lane for those that are turning into the right in, right out. But it also could be used for a bus when a bus needs to use that additional pavement.
So you think one would fit there? And
Yes.
still leave room for a sidewalk to cross?
Yes.
Thank you.
So I just heard you say that the right-in, right-turn lane could also be used as a bus stop?
I said some additional pavement could be used for both.
We would agree to put in the bus stop just past the driveway. There is 55 feet here, and we could easily create an extra lane, and we're willing to do that as a condition. The bus stop would move 50 to 60 feet, but there is adequate right-of-way along there, and we could put a bus stop turn-off, but I think it would be best located past our driveway, not before the driveway, simply because of any turning movements that would eventually occur, whether it be a signal or roundabout.
So let me follow up. 55 feet is adequate for a bus pull-off?
Well, that's all right-of-way. I mean, there's a lot of right-of-way there. We're just saying we would provide it.
I'm not talking about the right-of-way, whether the length is enough for a bus to pull off and be off the road and get in there and then be able to get back out again.
I would imagine that length, just me estimating it, would probably be more like 80 feet by the time it transitions or tapers in. Then the bus itself is 40 feet long and tapers back out again. But it is still in the right-of-way. We're not affecting anybody else's property. We're just saying that we would agree to pay for that. And coordinate, obviously, with DOT, with the city, and with WAVE.
Mr. Lawler?
Yeah, can I just ask the traffic engineer a question to make sure I understand? Because I think you covered this, I didn't catch it though. The numbers you used for your analysis, does that include the numbers expected with the new super street and the development, or is that using the current traffic on that street?
It's using both. It's using the current traffic and the future traffic from the Galleria development.
So with that future traffic, this intersection would still work?
That's correct.
It would still be safe,
Correct.
in your opinion?
Our analysis showed that the driveway didn't cause any negative impact to the intersection at Jones Road and the Galleria driveway, access road.
And then one other question, if the project did not have access to Eastwood, so Jones was all the access had to be through Jones, would that work or would that not work? I take it your client does not feel that that would work.
Well, we did not model it in that manner. That was not the intent of what we were trying to model. So, I think it would work, but again, as it's been stated, when you do that, you're just focusing all of the traffic from this development onto one location. So, it gives less choices for the motorists. So you're putting more traffic onto that intersection. So it's not to say that it wouldn't work, but it wouldn't, it would be impacted more.
Thank you.
Consider that. You came up with a plan and then you backed in your statistics to make that plan work.
No, we were asked to address a concern, a question of whether or not the right-in, right-out access negatively impacted this intersection. So that's what we focused.
That's all you did.
That's what we were asked to do. Yes, that's what we did.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Any other questions? Yeah. Mr. O'Grady?
Ms. Wolf, can I just ask you one more question on the drawing on the right? Is that an actual photo of Wrightsville Avenue, or is that just a mock-up?
No, this is the 2016 aerial photograph of Wrightsville Avenue.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. This time, I'm going to open up the public hearing. The public hearing will be set at 30 minutes. Each speaker will be allotted 3 minutes. Mrs. Sidbury, you will be keeping the time? Yes, ma'am. So if you will please come to the front, state your name for the record, where you live. It's open. Come on up.
Good evening. My name is Carol Sheffield, and I back up to this proposed project. I guess this is going to be show and tell for me tonight because this is the first time that I saw the new plan with the 20-foot buffer zone, which we had not seen. And that's really what we have been requesting is a 20-foot buffer zone. I want to start off by clarifying something. Mrs. Wolf had said numerous times about us who have purchased those properties knowing that there was a commercial space behind us. We did. But at that time, it was only zoned for a 2-story small office building. It wasn't annexed across the street, and so now we're looking at a 3-story proposed at 45 feet. So there is a big difference. And the other thing is, I was here a couple weeks ago and listened to her talk about the Victory Gardens, which I feel like that project is so similar to ours, and the fact that that's a 1-story development that they're proposing to build next to it. And she was proposing that they keep the roof line at the 25 feet. And she had specifically said that she wanted to do that so it didn't eclipse the single-story homes in the neighborhood. So this is a huge difference between, even though it's the same similarity to the neighborhood as the Victory Gardens, this is a huge difference in the 35-foot and 45-foot. On this picture, the first picture is actually what it currently looks like now. The second picture is actually what it looks like with a 20-foot buffer zone. And we did do the string line in the back and counted how many trees would be existing in the vegetation. And then the third picture would be as if it was a 10-foot buffer zone, we would lose all of our vegetation. But it sounds like they've agreed to do the 20-foot buffer zone, which is a huge benefit for us. The other picture, the next picture, just to show you what the vegetation looks like now, on the right side of that arrow is the existing trees. So you would see how much we would keep in that space. This next picture shows the height of the trees. So that would be a huge break for us, being able to screen the large building that's going to be built in the back. The following picture is 35-foot, which is currently at the Lumina station. The next picture we show just is showing from standing up top on the top of the building what 35 feet would be. If you look down, you can see like where our 7-foot fence line is, and then the red car would actually be where our house is, and that's the view that would present with the apartments that they would be looking down into our backyards. The next photo is the triangle, and the red marks indicate actually how close the back of our homes are to the property line. So our fence line runs, about 20 feet to the back of our homes from the fence line. The next photo basically shows the 10-foot that you've already seen in our property lines. Macomber Terrace, this is just a triangle portion of Macomber Terrace. It's still, if you look at the tax record, it still says it's part of Macomber Terrace. I feel like we were talked a lot about the streets tonight, and the entrance and the exit having the two, one entering in Wrightsville Avenue. I can tell you that in Macomber Terrace, we do have an in and out entrance. One goes in, one goes out. We had so much cut-through traffic during that time, we had to close off one of the ends of the community. So I would be concerned about that on this position. It's just, and the light at military cutoff, literally the cars are backed up from military cutoff all the way to Harris Teeter. So when I look at that roundabout, I'm thinking, where do all the cars go? Like when the light is turned red, where do they go when that hit that roundabout? So that's pretty much what the 20-foot buffer zone was really big for us. And like I said, that was the first time we've seen that tonight. So we're happy about that. Thank you.
Good evening. Greg Jones and my wife Jan Jones. We live beside the Sheffields, so we live directly in the path of this new building. As Carol has said both times before, we're not opposed to the building. We have not been opposed to the building. We met with the developer and said, look, we have no problem with you building the building, just give us a little bit of privacy. And the 35-foot height is what your zoning board said do, which we said that's great, we approve it, and the 20-foot setback, which is the two things we asked for, because as you saw in Carol's pictures, if you look at Lumina Station, that is 35 feet to the gutters. And that was my son-in-law that you saw holding up that piece of fencing, which was 7 feet high. And that red car is my house. So if these people who are going to be living in these houses are going to be literally looking in my backyard, in Sheffield's backyard, and the Melton's backyard all the time, nothing much I can do about it. But at 35 feet, I think at least you give us a little bit of privacy. The 40-some foot, as Mr. Loris O'Grady said, good Lord, I don't even know where number they're at now. 35 feet is where we would love to stay at, and a 20-foot buffer zone, and appreciate all your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Mr. Barnett.
Question again. Give me some understanding again, the difference between the 45 and, okay, I saw the picture, there's a 45 foot part, and then it goes up to like 48. The most that you're saying the building will be, the tallest the building will be is 48 feet, correct?
That's what the current design is, which makes this point, if you can see, I mean, these are probably 3-foot windows. So there's about 4 feet to from the eave, there's 4, there's probably another 3. So if this was 35, those eaves would be at 31. And in 31 feet, that's awfully difficult to have commercial height and your chases and in the first 2 stories, even if we hide the residential up under the roof, if you will. But I'm not sure I answered your question. The height is measured to this point right here. So with the 35-foot limitation, that would be the 35-foot where that would occur.
Okay, and then to the top of this, according to what I'm seeing here, is 48.
We're asking for it to be 48, which means that this point would be no more than 45.
Okay, and then my question, looking at this diagram, would there be windows above, let's say, 35 feet?
I'd have to defer to the architect to take a new look at the whole wall section. But generally, you would have a 12-foot ceiling height on a commercial space on the bottom floor. You've got 18 inches of spaces, maybe even 24, so that's at 14. Another 10 feet for the offices is 24. Another chase is 26. And then, I guess, 8 feet or so, of roof height on the inside of the residential units. So all of a sudden we're at 34, and that's just right to the eave. So then we have no room left for a peaked roof. So
Okay.
we can squeeze it down, but the 35 won't work for a 3-story building.
Right, but I guess my question is, usually a building, like a 3-story building, is it, the guy said they'll be looking in my backyard. And my question is, would people be up that high to look into his backyard? Or is that mostly roof, mostly?
No, as I pointed out, the eaves would be around 32 foot. So if you were standing in one of these residential units, which only the top floor is residential, what we did was oriented those patios off the residential towards Wrightsville Avenue and towards Jones. So we didn't keep any sort of public area, if you will, facing towards Macomber. We tried to avoid that. We were very careful in looking at that part of the design. There would definitely be windows, but if a 5-foot tall person were standing in there, they'd be roughly where my hand is here. And yes,
Okay.
they would be, up there at 30 feet or so, but the buffer and the existing vegetation is all part of trying to secure that. If this were a house, it could equally be 35 feet tall, and that's where the Planning Commission pulled their number from.
Right.
So those people would look down into a neighbor if the neighbor was in the yard. Everybody can be up to 35 in the residential. In the
Right.
office and institutional,
Okay,
we have that ability to go to 45 and would
Okay.
like it.
thank you.
Mr. Anderson?
Cindy, I think what Mr. Barnett was looking for was that red line. You never explained, at least not this time when you're up, that it's an average of all those peaks. Is that not correct?
It's the average of the highest peak. So you can sort of see that, if it was measured there, it'd be down a
Right.
foot or two, but
It's measuring
that is
all
the
those
highest.
peaks, and that's the average.
Yes.
I guess my question's actually for staff. The opacity that we talked about, what was the terminology, 100% opaque or something along those lines? Is that standing on the ground, or is that from? How do we define that from a height standpoint?
The buffer, I think I can.
I'll ask them.
Okay.
Sure, the planted buffer needs to be opaque from a ground height to 6 feet, and that has to be within 3 years of planting.
So the the illustration that I believe the lady gave us with, it's pretty cool, with the see-through, if you will, and I'm sure it's not 100% accurate, but it does give you a good idea of what we're talking about. They'd be required to kind of fill those gaps with evergreens or something up to 6 feet tall. Is that accurate?
That's correct, but she did have a fence on the rear of her property, and I don't know if that was 6 feet or 8 feet in height. The vegetation would be supplemented on the property for rezoning tonight.
So her fence, they can use her fence for opacity?
She's looking at her fence, then they would put the buffer.
I'm just asking if they're going to have opacity from their property up to 6 feet. Is that the
That's correct.
question? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Dunbar?
Cindy, would you put the drawing back up that shows the exposure or the elevation facing the Macumber? Okay, so that would be the bottom left, the view. So,
Yes. Mhm.
okay, just to follow up on what Clifford was asking, those windows, how tall are those windows?
I would imagine 3 to 4 feet.
How many?
3 to 4 feet of window. They're set at a 6'8" window
I'm
height.
sorry, let me ask, I didn't ask it clear. How high up are they?
The eave in this scenario would be approximately 39 feet.
Okay, so those windows are, those windows are up around 34, 35 feet?
Yes, the bearing height on the wall, if that was at 39, would put the window, the head of the window down to, but it's 2 feet above the normal height.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any other questions? Okay. You guys ready to vote?
I'd like for Don Bennett to come up, our transportation guy.
Mr. Bennett?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council.
Don, you're familiar with the complete street layout.
Yes, sir.
2 lanes in each direction. I think we got 100-foot right-of-way there. I think that's what's there. So you got 4 travel lanes, turn lanes, a bus stop, sidewalks, bike lanes, tree plazas. That's what the complete street looks like.
Complete street would be defined as that street, regardless of the number of lanes for the vehicle traffic, would include both bicycle, pedestrian, and transit amenities.
Okay. And are you in agreement with the way they've come up with their opinion?
I will qualify that as to neither traffic study has been sealed and finalized. So what's eventually submitted to us can differ from what we have and what we're considering tonight.
So what we're dealing with here tonight is an opinion,
Which
all appraisals and everything are their opinions.
That is correct, sir.
But this has not been, I think Cindy said they didn't go to that threshold and it's not been stamped, so it's an opinion.
Even after it is stamped, there will be some subjectivity to the opinion regarding this specific issue.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. We all got one. What's your opinion?
When looking at a relatively low-intensity development, it would be my preference to have a driveway on the downstream side of the intersection. The primary concern being is if you do not allow the driveway, the right turns from the site must come back to the original intersection to make a right turn.
Well, isn't that what intersections are for?
Well, except that we have a higher intensity development going across the street whose primary left turn access will be coming out here. Those right turns will then add to the number of vehicles conflicting with that left turn, requiring an additional amount of time or capacity taken away from Wrightsville Avenue.
So you're on record as saying that curb cut is not going to have interference at all with the future roundabout. That's what you're saying, so I want to hear you say it.
I said with intersection.
Pardon me?
With intersection.
I'm not talking about it. I'm talking about a roundabout.
Whether it's a roundabout or whether it's a traffic signal. If the right turn is removed from there, the left turn coming out of the higher intensity site is provided more capacity.
It's providing more capacity
For the left turn out of the more intense site.
We're not talking about a left turn. We're talking about a right in and right out. Where is the left turn you're talking about?
The left turn
Coming
will
out of
be
the
exiting the Galleria site.
Onto a roundabout.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the 55 feet to the west of their driveway curb cut, that's plenty of room for a bus pull-off, because the way they've got it, there's no room for a bus pull-off where it's slated to go.
I would not say that a bus turnout with appropriate tapers for a bus to move out, even at lowest speeds, 55 feet would not be sufficient for a bus turnout.
Okay. Well, Cindy mentioned that there's plenty more right-of-way along there.
That is correct. There is right-of-way available all the way to the driveway for McCumber Terrace.
Okay. And in the future, if, when the complete street is developed, and it's proven then by some other TIA expert that right in, right out is not working, what do we do then?
As a general rule, to close a driveway where you have a property that has frontage onto a roadway, you have to demonstrate a safety issue.
Okay.
Say that again. Demonstrate what?
You would have to, generally, when you're taking away access, you have to prove some burden or some safety burden on the roadway. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I may have to consult with my city attorney because I'm not one. Any property having frontage on a roadway is required to be provided safe and reasonable access, correct?
Generally speaking, yes.
Okay, yes, sir. So safe and reasonable, two terms there. Safe. If we go to close that driveway, we do have to prove that there is a known safety issue associated with it.
Were you involved in the planning commission hearing when this was presented to the planning commission?
I can't remember whether I actually presented or answered questions at that meeting.
Okay.
Mr. Anderson?
This is Don, thanks. This is for staff, unless somebody else says something for Don. I'm good, thanks.
Okay. Anybody else?
But
Thank you.
go ahead, jump in.
To follow up, the 108 feet, is that considered an adequate separation as a general rule? And would that be 108 feet from the roundabout to the access? Is that considered an adequate separation for a functioning roundabout, and particularly if it's a higher use roundabout?
Well, the key with the roundabout, unlike a signalized intersection, is the speeds will be controlled in the roundabout. When you're coming out of that roundabout, you should not be going more than 25 to 27 miles an hour, relatively low speed. Therefore, the amount of deceleration necessary for a vehicle traveling west on Wrightsville Avenue to turn into the driveway, most driveway movements on a right turn being 15 to 18 miles an hour, where there's only a 7 mile an hour differential there. And there's not a whole lot of acceleration that can happen in 108 feet. So I do not term that decelerating traffic into the driveway would be an issue. If it were turned out to be an issue, then obviously a right turn lane could be developed coming out of the right roundabout to allow that traffic to move out of the traffic stream and allow Wrightsville Avenue to keep going.
So generally, you're okay with 108,
I start getting nervous around 50 feet. I start getting very nervous around 50 to 75 feet.
All right, thank you.
This is a North Carolina Department of Transportation roadway. I would have to defer to their driveway manual as to what that minimum is. The driveway manual states that you should not have driveway access within the functional area of an intersection. On the approach side, that can go back to as far as the traffic queues up entering the intersection. On the departure side, it's generally 50 to 75 feet.
Mr. Anderson?
My questions of the other rest of the staff. Thanks, Don.
Thank you.
I guess were we aware, or I guess maybe I missed it, but that they weren't on board with the 35 feet coming out of planning. In other words, they didn't agree to that at planning. Is that correct?
I believe the applicant agreed at the planning commission hearing to make it 35 feet. They're mutually established conditions.
Because that was kind of a surprise. All right, thank you.
Mr. Barnett? I didn't hear you clearly. You respond.
I believe that the applicant agreed to the 35-foot height at the planning commission hearing as it's a mutually established condition.
Okay, so my question, how do you all feel about the 45 feet? How do you all feel about the 45 feet? What's your staff? Yeah, what's your thoughts?
Sure. The height restriction that the planning commission had originally intended was to protect the single-family residences from, the view of the third story of the residential. Of course, the O&I district has a 45-foot by right height, and we would want to make sure that those existing residences are protected through buffering, et cetera.
So, and from what I'm hearing, then they will be protected because of the buffering and because of the vegetation.
If we go forward with the plan as presented this evening, which includes additional buffering, the package included only a 10-foot wide buffer. So if they included the additional 20 feet, they would meet the code standard.
Okay, all right. And the 45 feet then is okay?
That was added at the planning commission, not a recommendation that originated with the staff.
But right now, the staff would say, okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay to what?
45 feet.
Okay on the 45. With the 45, okay with the 45 feet height and the 20-foot buffer.
Mrs. Crowe, could we clarify that? You folks were okay with a 45-foot height as long as there was a 20-foot buffer?
Yes, we would be.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, that's what I was asking. Thank you.
Mr. O'Grady?
Just following up with that, we saw pictures today, there's a lot of pretty tall trees in there. Those would have to remain the existing vegetation?
That's correct. The natural vegetation would have to be retained in that buffer.
So, you're saying that 45 would be okay if you have a 20-foot buffer, and when it left the planning commission, they had a 20-foot buffer.
And 35 feet.
And 35 feet, so what?
The plan until this evening had a 10-foot wide buffer.
Till this evening. Oh, when it left the planning commission, it was 10.
Oh, okay. I got it.
So y'all tonight, since the meeting started, y'all have gone from 35 to 45? Help me here.
When this first went through planning commission, there was a 45-foot height that the staff supported so long as there was a 20-foot buffer. The planning commission decided they wanted to negotiate a building height of 35 feet, which we included in our conditions.
What you said?
Which have been included in your conditions in your packet tonight. Tonight, we see a plan that shows a 20-foot buffer and a 48-foot tall building, which again, when staff brought this first to planning commission, we had no issue with the height, it was the issue with the buffer. So when they brought the 35-foot building from planning commission, that was a negotiation from that board.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Lawler?
Yeah, I'm confused. I'm looking at our materials, and the materials have a buffer of 20 feet at item 7, and then 35 feet as item 12.
That's correct. The applicant did not amend the site plan between the planning commission issuing that recommended condition and tonight's hearing. They have done that and presented it this evening, but did not present it to the staff prior to this hearing. So the planning commission made a ruling that they would like to see the wider buffer and the lower height. The applicant never provided that plan until tonight.
Right, but the recommendation before us, the ordinance in front of us is the 2035.
The recommendation before you is from the planning commission recommendation. They added that 35 feet.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may, I would note to council that the conditions included in the ordinance before you reference a site plan submitted on April 10th. When council takes action either way, I would ask the council be very specific whether they're acting on the site plan that was presented to you tonight or the one that's in your packet.
motion yet.
We have a motion here to approve by Councilman Ryan Barker, second by, or, I'm sorry. Okay, we have a motion to approve by Councilmember Barnett, second by Mayor Pro Tem Haynes. Discussion.
The proposed amendment as presented tonight. Yeah. Yes. It's P1, case number CD 25-518.
Let me clarify that, Mr. Barnett. 20-foot buffer with a 45-foot height?
Yes, sir. As presented tonight, yes.
All right.
All right.
Can I ask for further clarification? Or perhaps an addition? I believe the applicant tonight said that in the event this road is made into a complete street, it would be willing to pay for a bus pullout.
Yes, that's part of the,
That would be an additional condition.
right, that's part of it as mentioned tonight. Yeah. All right.
So 20-foot buffer, 45-foot height, bus pullout west of the driveway.
Bus pull out west of the driveway.
Anything else?
I would like to add some language to that in the event that the complete street is built, that the applicant would not be disagreeable to closing that curb cut. Guys, you're selling those neighbors out.
Barnett?
Let's talk about, because one of the things that we talked about in the beginning, when I mentioned to the staff, what would happen if the street didn't work and all that, fix it, the other guys would have to fix it. I don't know if I'm comfortable adding that last piece.
I'm uncomfortable with 45 feet.
Okay, we'll vote on it, right?
You're uncomfortable with it, why do it?
No, I'm uncomfortable adding that statement to my motion. That's what I'm saying.
Mr. Barnett, could you read the consistency statement, and then we will go ahead and take a vote and have discussion after that.
Do it that way. All right, I move to approve the proposed amendment to rezone property located at 6789 Wrightsville Avenue from R10 Residential District to O and I1 CD, Office and Instructional District 1, Conditional District for a mixed-use building, and to find it to be consistent with the relevant policies in the comprehensive plan, based on the application's material and the information provided at the public hearing, as well as the information provided at the public hearing today, and in the staff report, and to find approval of the rezoning request is reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. The vertically mixed-use structure provides an appropriate transition from the existing single-family residential to existing and planned commercial development in the vicinity. Parking in the rear of the building ensures a walkable and active streetscape along Wrightsville Avenue, especially with the high-capacity transit route and the connection to the Wade bus on the property. The project is designed to have an active ground floor and moderate lot coverage while balancing environmental sensitivity as identified in the watershed resource protection designation.
Very good. That is the motion on the floor. Discussion. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor of that motion, please, wait a minute. Let me close the public hearing. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item passes 5-2. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Mayor Pro Tem Haynes, second by Councilmember Anderson. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? That item passes unanimously. Okay, with that, we're going to take a 5-minute recess.
Good idea.